Hi, welcome to African Perspective. My name is Nelda. Today we're going to be talking about Cape Verde. The reason we're talking about Cape Verde is precisely because nobody talks about this country. It is one of the smallest African countries. It has only a population of roughly 600,000 people. And recently, Cape Verde had $49 million invested in a tech hub. And I think it's very, very important that we talk about it because it is going to be such a big move, not just for the western part of Africa because of Cape Verde's positioning in the continent, but it's going to have great implications for the rest of the continent. And I think it's finally time that somebody talks about it because there are other African countries like Kenya, like South Africa, Egypt, Morocco, Tunisia that are making strides in the tech industry. And again, nobody's really talking about it. Everybody's paying attention to Switzerland and Sweden and South Korea. And I'm like, Africa is also doing stuff about this. So we're going to talk about Cape Verde today. We're going to dip off it just a little bit into other countries and what is happening in the tech world in Africa. It's going to be a nice and short video, but I hope this will be a nice foundational video in talking about tech in the continent. So if that sounds like something that is interesting to you, feel free to subscribe, to share, and like the video. So Cape Verde is an archipelago off the coast of West Africa. Basically, an archipelago is a collection of islands, and there are multiple that make up Cape Verde. Other people refer to it as Cabo Verde. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. But one of the main islands that people stay at is known as Santiago, and then there's also São Vicente. The capital is Praia, and like I said in the introduction, the country only has a population of roughly 600,000, which is quite a Okay, it's not a lot, really, because I'm thinking back to my hometown. I'm from Tanzania. I'm from the capital city, Dodoma. We have a population of roughly 3 million just in my home region. So 600,000 for an entire country is quite a small amount. But also, I think this makes it the perfect case study to see what one country can do with its population, which is fairly small compared to countries like Nigeria, for example, with 150 million people. But at the same time, what I like about Cape Verde, because I was looking into the country, doing an overview of the country's profile, is that they have a literacy rate of 91%. A literacy rate that high is very rare in Africa as a continent, just because if you think of a country like Chad, for example, it has 27% literacy rate. So 91%, I mean, there are other countries like Seychelles, for example, which are all the way up to like 96%. So there are countries in Africa that are doing such a great job already in taking care and ensuring that their people are educated, that their people are grabbing these opportunities. And definitely, we live in the age of information, so I don't need to be the one telling you that it's very important for every African country to pay attention to what is going on in the tech world. So what did Cape Verde do? Cape Verde started something called TechPark CV, and this is meant to be like a digital hub that will invite foreign investments. The best part about this entire scenario is that, number one, the bank that invested in it is an African bank. Okay, it's the African Development Bank, invested 45.5 million euros, which equates to roughly $49 million. And not just that, but they're creating an actual environment where people are going to want to work in. So they have 2.5 corporate tax rates, which are basically unheard of, because if you think of other than the Bahamas and the Cayman Islands, which are like 0%, Cape Verde at 2.5% is very rare to hear, because if you look at India, for example, they have a corporate tax rate of 30%. If you look at the United States, it's 21%. If you look at France, it's 24.5%. All the other countries, it's upwards of 20% basically. So 2.5% corporate tax is very attractive, because even Dubai, like the UAE itself, they're doing 9%. It was introduced recently, I know, but compared to what Cape Verde is doing with TechPark, this is good news for the continent, and I think it is setting such a great example for other countries to follow as well. And I said initially, like in the introduction as well, that countries like Kenya and South Africa and Nigeria are already doing a great job at leading fintech development, especially. I know like Nala, the founder is Tanzanian, but the headquarters of Nala are in Kenya, which is now known as the Silicon Savannah, because they are essentially sort of like replicating what is happening in the Silicon Valley in the US, but they're bringing it in Africa, and they're developing African startups which serve the African people. And I think this is exactly what we need. I know with like TechPark in Cape Verde, they're inviting foreign companies as well. I have no issue with that, to be honest, because I think, like I said in one of my previous videos as well, there's something that needs to be said about foreign investments. I think foreign investments overall are not a bad thing per se, depending on how depending on the kind of agreement and the contract that you have with the company or the country that you're working with. And I think they're already setting themselves up really, really well by having an African bank invest. They already had visitors from like Portugal. They already have a few companies that are already on there because they're in phase one of the project. And it's estimated that by 2030, they're going to be able to create roughly 2,000 to 3,000 new jobs, which for a country that has 600,000 people, that is amazing. And the best part of this all, I know I said that the fact that they have a very low corporate tax rate is the best part, but this is the second best part, is that they are a country that is very reliant on tourism. Cape Verde is absolutely beautiful. It's one of the most, I mean, virtually every country in Africa is beautiful. And I'm very biased, so I'm just going to put it out there. I'm very biased, and I do think the most beautiful countries in the world are in Africa. Cape Verde is one of the most beautiful countries in the most beautiful continent. So it's just absolutely stunning. They had 1 million tourists just in 2023 alone, and that number definitely increased in 2024. Definitely will increase by the end of 2025. But they're trying not to rely too heavily on tourism because their GDP is roughly reliant on tourism by 25%. So a quarter of the money that they make for the country comes from tourism, and they're being smart about it because they're like, first of all, there's climate change going on. Things are going to be changing around. And second of all, you need to diversify your portfolio. Like, this is also true on the personal level. If you're investing, you don't just put everything into one stock. You diversify. You put them in tiny little baskets, or you get like an ETF or mutual fund, but you don't want to put everything in one basket, or you don't want to put most of your eggs in one basket. You want to like evenly spread them out. And I think that this is what Cape Verde is doing as well, being like, okay, we're a beautiful country, we have tourism, we have 1 million tourists coming from all over the world, but let's start creating something else for ourselves. And this, I think, is such a good example for other countries in Africa, because sure, Africa is beautiful, sure, we have the wildlife, sure, we have savannas and mountains and rivers and waterfalls and whatever else people come to see in Africa, or like nice beaches like Zanzibar, but then that shouldn't be the only thing that we have to offer the world. So Cape Verde is saying, hey, we can also offer you really, really good infrastructure to be able to host your startups, and we're not going to charge you too much, and we're going to create all the facilities. Now, speaking of facilities, one of my greatest concerns is that in Africa, one of the biggest challenges that fintech companies face, as well as just the entire technology space is facing, is infrastructure. I was looking into this, and unfortunately, or fortunately actually, I come from a more developed side of my hometown, Dodoma, and I get internet. It's not the best internet in the world, but it works. And I thought that that was the case for majority of the country. And then I found out that Africa as a continent only has 43% internet penetration rate, which basically, I know that sounds very nasty, but it basically means, if you look at Africa as a continent, roughly 43% of the continent has access to like proper good speed internet, which we're not even talking about 5G at this point. Just like if you look at 4G, for example, and that is not even half. That is not even half. And to be able to develop a digital hub, I mean, Cape Verde is doing great for itself, but I'm talking about the continent as a whole. To be able to develop digital hubs beyond these few countries, we need to be able to first work on the foundation, and one of them would be infrastructure, ensuring that we have good access to the internet, ensuring that we have good network systems. That is fundamental, and not just like internet infrastructure, but also roads, like being able to. So if you want Microsoft, for example, to have an office in your country, you would want the Microsoft workers to be able to drive on reasonable roads, not just any dust road. So these are very practical things that I'm unfortunately, like, it's so sad that as a continent we're still talking about building roads that are good. I mean, I know every country builds roads and all of that, but I'm just disappointed that this is still a conversation that we're having. Like, let's build better roads. Let's ensure that we have internet. Let's ensure that there's no load shedding. Like, you're bringing, Microsoft or Apple into your country, and then in the middle of a meeting, the electricity is gone. So this is something that we really generally need to talk about. Beyond that as well, because I mentioned a few countries like Kenya, South Africa, Nigeria, Egypt, Tunisia, the way the funding is split across the continent is very, I'm not going to say unfair, just because fairness is a very, very tricky concept, but it's not reasonably spread. But also, I think the spread is uneven. We're going to go with uneven because Kenya, for example, gets roughly $600 million, upwards of $600 million invested in its tech industry. South Africa also gets roughly 400 million. But if you look at Tanzania, which by the way is the seventh in the continent in terms of the amount of technology investments that it receives, it's only 50 million, and that's the seventh, all the way from number one, which is Kenya. And Tanzania and Kenya are neighbors. So to me, it's just like it's nice to see a country that is sort of like off on the side, Cape Verde, namely Cape Verde, which is the topic of this video. It's nice to see that a country like Cape Verde has $49 million being invested into it. And I'm so happy because I'm like, yes, this is exactly what we need. We need more investments and we need to put them to use to build our own tech industries. Like people are talking about artificial intelligence now and we're still talking about mobile money. It's good progress, but we need to move even faster than that. And not just that, something else that I just wanted to touch on, because I want to keep this video nice and short, is that the regulatory environment in Africa is very, very intense. And this is something that Magatte Wade speaks about a lot. Let me know if you want me to do a reaction video to some of the work that she does. She speaks a lot about regulations in Africa and how hard businesses are to be run in the continent, just because the government will create like a million things that you need to check before you can actually start a business. And I think this is something that African countries need to consider as well, is that you need to make it as easy as possible for somebody to open a business and run it and not worry about losing their money to taxes. So again, Cape Verde is charging 2.5 corporate taxes in the tech park. So what are we going to do with the other African countries? If somebody wants to open a business in Tanzania, how much are you going to charge them? If somebody wants to open a business in, I don't know, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, how much are you going to charge them? Are you actually incentivizing entrepreneurs to start businesses, to start investing in their own countries? That is something that we'll need to talk about as well when we're talking about the tech industry. Beyond that, one last thing that I want to talk about is just education and skills. There is very, very high illiteracy rates in the continent. Again, Cape Verde, which is the subject of this video, are doing great. 91% is almost unheard of in the continent. And I think that is also one of the foundational things that we need to keep a hold of and say, the world is advancing very quickly. People are moving into artificial intelligence, which is part of the technology world. And our people still can't read and write. That is shameful, to say the least. We need to consider the fact that the gap between what countries like Switzerland, for example, which is ranked the highest in the Global Innovation Index, countries like Sweden, countries like South Korea, and the United States and China, the gap between them and us is so high that these countries will, it's like they will always rule, they will rule not just themselves, but they will end up ruling the entire world in perpetuity, and we're not going to miss out on all the innovations. And it is concerning to me because a lot of the development that is happening in the tech industry is not from Africa, and it's not benefiting Africa. So we're not getting anything. We are not the people who are we're not the people who are dealing with creating better innovation. We're not the people who are benefiting from the innovation. So where are we? We're not part of the conversation, and that annoys me so much. And I know I come off very angry sometimes in these videos, but I just feel like I'm just frustrated because I want to be part of the conversation. I want my people to be part of the conversation, and currently we are not. So it's such a good thing that Cape Verde is doing this. Is such a good thing, and I hope all other African countries can do something similar. $50 million is a lot of money. I know they got it from the African Development Bank, and I think other countries can do something similar and create digital hubs for people to innovate, create spaces for entrepreneurs to come up with tech ideas and to be wild and take risks, because that is exactly what is happening in Silicon Valley. There is nothing that these other countries have that makes them a little bit more special than we are. They're exactly the same as us. They're human beings. If you cut them, they'll bleed. They go to the toilet as well. So there's nothing special about them. It's just that they are actually investing in themselves as countries and they're leading innovation. But I don't want Africa to remain in the background and not take part in this conversation. So I'm so glad Cape Verde is doing this. I know this video is nice and short, but I wanted to just highlight this news because I'm not seeing it anywhere. I saw it on Instagram and I thought, you know what, might as well make a video about it and talk about it and let people know there's something great happening in Cape Verde and they deserve a congratulations. So that is all for today, and I hope this video was very useful. If you have any comments, let me know and I'll be happy to answer them, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.